A top U.S. general has said that Iran has significant tactical capability despite the strikes by U.S. and Israel during the recent war. Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, the nominee to head the U.S. Central Command, made the assessment while pointing out the limited retaliatory missile strike on a U.S. military base in Qatar, responding to a senator who asked whether Tehran still poses a threat to U.S. troops and Americans. He said they do. The statement by Vice Admiral Cooper, who is the Deputy Commander of the U.S. Central Command, coming at a time when there is a debate ongoing about the extent of damages to Iran during the so-called 12-day war. The U.S. carried out an attack against 3 Iranian nuclear sites, remember. President Trump has credited the unprecedented attacks with the total obliteration of Iran's nuclear capabilities and said they had set the country's program back decades. The CIA director, John Ratcliffe, in a statement said that new intelligence from a historically reliable source indicated that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. These new assessments have come after a preliminary report from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency said the nuclear program had been set back only a few months and was not completely and fully obliterated. According to people familiar with the report, it found that while the strikes at Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan nuclear sites did significant damage, they were not totally destroyed. During the hearing, Cooper admitted that Iran is strategically weakened and tactically degraded. He also characterized its proxies, particularly Hamas in the Gaza Strip and Hezbollah in Lebanon, as significantly degraded. But he added that the U.S. needs to continue to watch them very closely to deter any future threat. And with us on the broadcast this minute is Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Thanks very much for being here. Let me start off by asking you for your assessment of where things stand right now. Of course, there are a lot of questions that have been raised. What do you make of what's happening right now?
So let's start with the overall picture that we have a tenuous ceasefire, which is still holding. The Iranian regime wants that ceasefire because they have been badly damaged. Indeed, they're fighting for their survival, well beyond the debate over the damage to the nuclear sites. At this point, Donald Trump and certainly the Trump administration want that ceasefire because U.S. involvement in the Iran war was threatening to cause domestic difficulties for Trump. It was dividing his supporters. Members of the Netanyahu government do not want the ceasefire. They would like to continue the attacks on Iran, but unless Donald Trump switches back to supporting their attacks, they don't have the leverage to keep this going. So it's very critical to watch Trump because he has flip-flopped several times in the past week. And if he suddenly decides, yes, there need to be more strikes on Iran, then Israel would have the space to open up those attacks. That's the overall picture. In terms of the specific damage, we need to distinguish between what General Cooper said about Iran's conventional military capabilities and the capabilities of its allies in the region and the nuclear sites. Iran certainly still retains, according to General Cooper, the military capabilities where if it wanted to, it could attack American personnel in the region. But the point here is that Iran has shown that it does not want to do that. The missile strike on Qatar the other night was a token strike. The Americans were warned in advance so they could shelter their personnel because Iran then signaled, look, we're not attacking your personnel. We really want the ceasefire. Now, the nuclear sites, which you're asking about, and there's a lot we could discuss, but the fundamental is this at this point. Donald Trump simply put out a political statement that the sites were completely obliterated. That is not true. You put out a political statement that the programs, nuclear programs, have been set back by years. That is not true. On the other hand, the nuclear site sustained some damage, and the question is how much damage. For example, if we take that underground facility at Fort Doe, buried inside a mountain, the one that the Israelis could not reach where they needed the Americans, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, said today that although the bombs may not have penetrated all the way to underground, the vibrations from the bombs have damaged the centrifuges. That's what enriches the uranium. They've damaged the centrifuges so they're no longer operational. So that is some damage at Fort Doe. There have been damaged buildings at Isfahan, which stores uranium, but it appears it has not hit the key areas of Isfahan. And then importantly, the third site at Natanz, which the Americans are not really talking about, there is a new underground facility which has been declared by the Iranians to the IAEA, and the Americans did not even attack that facility. So it is most definitely capable of being operational. Overall, as the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency assessment summarized, Iran could return to enrichment of 60% uranium, not military-grade uranium. Iran is not producing that yet, but it can return to 60% uranium within a few months.
Donald Trump has also said the U.S. will be holding nuclear talks with Iran next week. What are your expectations from those talks? What do you expect will be brought to the table? And to what extent do we expect an outcome?
There is an unconfirmed report, and I emphasize unconfirmed, that the Trump administration has now agreed to those talks in Oman next week, where there have been 5 previous sets of talks, but there has not been a response from the Iranians yet. I think the Iranians are going to be very wary about going into talks so soon after they were attacked by the Israelis and by the Americans. But if the Iranians return, you still have this fundamental question, which is that the Trump administration may well demand that Iran give up all of its enrichment of uranium, including for its civilian programs. Iran is not going to agree to that. They are not going to agree to give up their right to enrichment. It is a fundamental line. It's part of their projection that they have scientific, technological capability, and they need it for civil purposes. So if the Trump administration says the talks are preconditioned on Iran giving up its nuclear enrichment program, that won't happen. Remember that Iran's parliament this week has actually gone as far as to say Iran should leave the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now that decision has to be approved by higher authorities, but certainly domestically, Iranians do not want to go into negotiations if it's preconditioned on surrendering their right to enrich uranium.
We're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank your viewers.